Very beautiful, thank you. That was my talk right there, actually. Thank you very much, I'm done. Why don't you guys get up and sing the next song? No, I'm just So good morning. Our topic today is infinite imagination. And I'm going to go on infinitely about infinite imagination. So just get comfortable in your seats. This is where you will live out the rest of your lives. Imagination has been defined as it's also called the faculty of imagining, is the ability to form mental images, sensations, and concepts in a moment when they are not perceived through sight, hearing, or other senses. Imagination is the work of the mind that helps create. Imagination helps provide meaning to experience and understanding to knowledge. It is a fundamental faculty through which people make sense of the world and plays a key role in the learning process. Imagination is the faculty through which we encounter everything. The things that we touch, see, and hear coalesce into definite forms through the processes of our imagination. So do you think imagination is important? I love that line. It's the faculty through which we encounter everything. We'd like to talk in this teaching about the power of the word. And our words have great power, but before they are ever words, they are images. The mind thinks in pictures. The mind holds in images. If you want to know the images that you or somebody else are holding, you'll listen to their language. I can't do this. I'm really excited about that. I'm going to be nailed to the wall for my installation. How's that for an image, you know? I was very comforted to realize that they can't take those pictures down. They can't just leave them up. So the wall is already occupied, so I don't have to be worried about being nailed to the wall. I'm assured that I will be free to move about the stage, you know, even next Sunday. So I'm excited about that. But we talked about our images if we listen to it. As my friend Michael Beckwith says, there are no secret thoughts. Your life is your thought. And your thoughts are your images moved into form. So what are the images we're holding in our imagination, in our image nation? We live in a nation, we live in a universe, if you will, of images. Take a breath. What are the images that we hold? And do you like the ones you're getting so far? In some cases, I know you'll say yes. In some cases, maybe we could do a little bit better, right? So this process is always happening. It's always going on. We're always creating. Images are always flowing, and they're always moving into form. Ernest Holmes likens it to being in an iron foundry, where the metal is always flowing, and we're forming, molds for the metal to flow into. And we're always forming molds. We get to create the shapes. The metal is always flowing. We're not responsible for melting the ore down into metal or making the raw ingredients of it. We're responsible for creating the forms in which it goes. So in your mind, in your imagination, what are the forms you're creating? And do they serve you? Do they bring you greater joy, greater love, greater health, greater wholeness? So often we get caught up in looking at the circumstances, that which is around, stances, that which is standing around us. We look at our checkbook to decide whether we feel rich or poor. We look at our body to decide whether we feel healthy or whether we feel attractive. We look at our relationship status to decide if we're loved or lovable. We look at all the outer circumstances to decide who we are, and yet that's backwards. You know, I love the old Wayne Dyer book, which he stole that title from somebody else, but it was the you'll see it when you believe it. Most of us learned, well, I'll believe it when I see it. It's reverse. I'll see it when I believe it. We start with your imagination, pure imagination, as they say. And I love that line, want to change the world, there's nothing to it. And in a way, there isn't. The only reason we think there is because we've got an image that there's something in the way of changing the world. Got it? Okay? There's the government, there's the, you fill it out. We all fill it out. And all that is our image nation. I like my friend Michael Beckwith talks about, we can get into damnation. Damnation is where you dam up the flow of the imagination. Okay? And then we get into stagnation, where nothing is flowing. So we want to open up and play with our infinite imagination. We want to dance with that. We want to play with that. Albert Einstein said, I believe in intuition and inspiration. Imagination is more important than knowledge. I love that line. For knowledge is limited, whereas imagination embraces the entire world, stimulating process and giving birth to evolution. Knowledge is limited. And the sad thing was, most of us, when we went to school, we were sat in desks and force-fed knowledge. Memorize this, repeat this back to me, data, 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 knowledge, knowledge, knowledge. Now, it's good to have some knowledge. Without it, we can't function in the world. But what oftentimes happens is, and stop daydreaming, stop being so imaginative, color within the lines, sit within the desk, only take recess and play at this point in time. Okay, that time is over, stop playing. Basically, stop being yourself, and come back and learn. Anybody besides me? Take a breath. Anybody besides me have that kind of schooling? Okay, just take a breath, big collective breath. Okay, we're not there anymore. Good. We get to play in our imaginations. And somebody like Einstein reminds us that imagination is greater than knowledge. I love it. Imagination embraces the entire world. It embraces, if you will, the entire universe, the infinite presence. It embraces that. It taps us into something that's beyond the knowing, the knowledge that we have. Like I said, the knowledge is good. It helps us to function in the world, but it's limited. It's limited. Because we're limited to what we already know, and imagination is beyond what we know. If you have a life that you want to have something better in, you want to go beyond what you know. You want to go beyond the images you've been holding so far. And so it's the process of playing. Sometimes we get to be like Alice of Alice in Wonderland, one of my favorite little characters. There's no use in trying, Alice said. One can't believe impossible things. The Red Queen replies, I dare say you haven't had much practice. When I was your age, I always did it for half an hour a day. Why, sometimes I believed as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. What I love about that is there's a formula in that. Half an hour a day. What do most people who tell us about how to change our thinking and change our life say? Spend about a half an hour a day. When? First thing in the morning. Last thing before you go to bed. And here's the Red Queen 100 years earlier saying, I imagine 6 impossible things before breakfast. I believe. Not just imagine. I believe. And this is the other half of the formula. I believe 6 impossible things before breakfast. Because you see, it's one thing to imagine impossible things. It's quite another to, are you willing to believe 6 impossible things? Or even 1 impossible thing? See, for some of us, having a body that is just an absolute joy to occupy and to play in and to be in seems like an impossible thing. We have this thing that says, I'm a certain age, therefore at that age my body does such and such. Really? Who imaged that up? I remember when I was in my early 40s, there was a woman in the office I was working in who was celebrating her 50th birthday. And it was not a good-looking 50, let me just put it that way. And I remember I heard my mind go, oh, that's what 50 looks like. And I immediately grabbed my mind, because I was aware enough of my thinking back then. I immediately grabbed him and said, that is not me at 50. That is not me at 50. And I changed and had a different image. I have friends, I was fortunate to be around friends who were in their 70s who were still doing long bicycle rides and just sharp as tacks and out having a great time. We've all met people who are in their 60s and are hanging out in wheelchairs, in retirement, in old folks communities, just kind of barely alive. And nothing against wheelchairs. People can be in a wheelchair and be fabulously alive. But, the attitude of, I'm nearly dead. And then we met people who are in their 80s and 90s who are out there celebrating life and being fully alive. They're learning to parachute out of planes. They're learning to surf. They're learning new languages. They're going and taking trips. Which one do you want to be? I'll take option number 2. The other day I was in Michael's. I was getting some stuff framed, and there was a guy standing beside me. We got into a conversation. He was. I think I told you about him last week. He was pointing out his artwork. He was 70 years old when we got to talking. I put him in his 50s, but he was 70. And then I got talking. I said, well, I'm 63, and the young woman behind the counter, who was probably in her late 20s, early 30s, is like going, oh my God. She said, I figured you were in your mid-50s, and I figured you were in your 40s, And so it's a paradigm. It's what do we want to have for our image? Do we have the joy of life still coursing through us, or do we want to sit there and go, well, I'm a certain age? And I find myself, now that I'm over 60, there's something about 60, okay? Each of us has a number, don't we? Where suddenly it's like, okay, it's like the young woman up here, next year I'm going to be 18. I'm going to be an adult. Okay? And most of us laugh because it's like, well, we're still 50 and we're still trying to figure out how to be an adult, Some of the youngest people I know are old in terms of the numbers. Some of the most youthful, vibrant people I know are 60 and 70 and 80 and still trying to figure out how to be adults, or else have quit trying to figure out how to be adults, just celebrating their childlikeness, not childishness, but childlikeness, their freshness. I'll have to work with her afterwards. We'll talk about becoming adults or not. We have impossible things. We want a relationship, but our heart's been broken. Or we think we're too old, or we're too skinny, fat, not enough money, all the good ones are taken, blah, 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 blah. I live in Reading, therefore I can't find anybody. If I was in, you fill in the blank, I could find somebody. I don't know how to date. All the stuff, right? All right. That little one understands it. And it's all imagination. It's all our image making. What's the images you want to hold? I love that joy. That's how we all should be. Yeah, let's just all do that. Yeah! Oh, I love it. Doesn't that feel good? Yeah. That's what I want my life to be, one big yeah. I want to wake up in the morning and go, yeah. I want to look at the person who I'm in a relationship with and go, yeah. I want to look at the home that I live in and go, yeah. I want to look at my bank account and go, yeah. And I don't care if I'm sitting there going, I have no bloody idea how I'm going to pay the rent today, but yeah. I better not say it, my property manager's sitting right over there. I do have an idea how I'm going to pay the rent. I already paid the rent this month. Yeah, it's awkward when certain people are in the audience, Yeah. And so, can we look at our lives? Can we look at everything? Can we hold that image? I had somebody who's in the Prosperity Plus 2 class, say, just last week she decided she wanted to have some extra income. And she said all of a sudden, she doesn't normally get extra income, and all of a sudden more showed up. She's like, I love how this stuff works. We open to it. Are we willing to open up our imagination? Because the universe doesn't have any blocks. There's no big guy in the sky sitting up there going, like you, don't like you. You want that? I'm sorry. You can't have that today. No, joy is not on sale today. Sorry, we're closed. Okay? There's nothing in the universe saying that. Take a breath. So we get to make it up and play. And the good news, bad news is the amount of joy, the amount of love, and the amount of wealth, and the amount of health, and the amount of vibrant aliveness we have in our lives right now is what we have chosen based on the images we've had in the past. That's the good news, bad news. Here's the other good news. You can change your images. Amen. You can change your images, and when you change your images, your results will change. It's like having a bolt of cloth. Mary Mann Morrissey talks about this, having a bolt of cloth. The cloth will become any pattern that you put on it. Anything that you decide it's going to be. From a beautiful dress or a lovely shirt to a purse to a tie to a handkerchief, anything else. The fabric doesn't sit there and go, I don't want to be that. That's a waste of my talent. How dare you use me as a handkerchief? It just conforms. It just becomes that. The universe, the one mind, the substance, the field of infinite possibility becomes what we choose it to be. And so we get to play with it. So I want to invite us, all of us, to start stretching our imagination. To start playing with our imagination more than we ever have before. It's constantly forming our experience in life. Ernest Holmes talks about there's this one mind in the reading that we had this morning. One of these days I'm going to have Damien sit there and go, okay, this reading is from Science Mind, page 87, paragraph 4. Pull out your books, please. You know, like they do in the Bible churches? You know, pull out your Bible. You know, okay. Sorry, it didn't go over. We'll work on that. Never know till you try. There is no such thing as your mind, my mind, and God's mind. There is only mind. And you know, somebody was asking me in the hallway earlier today, when we say mind, am I talking about just the intellect? No, we're talking about the entire experience. Mind, heart, spirit, body, everything, all. There's not a word to really encompass that, so Ernest used mind. It was the best thing that he could come up with in the 20s and 30s. But there is no that and this. In essence, there isn't a you and a me, there is an us. You know, we were talking about my installation this coming Saturday, and it's like an honoring of me, and I said, no, it's not just an honoring of me, it's an honoring of all of us. We all collectively created this experience. It's an honoring of you. It's an honoring of me. It's an honoring of this teaching. It's an honoring of this path. And I hope you'll join us for that, because it's really going to be powerful. That which we call our subjective mind. And subjective mind simply is in religious science speak, we have a conscious mind, which is what we choose with. That's what forms the form. That's what puts the pattern on the fabric. So we choose, and we are constantly choosing. Every moment we are choosing. Right now you're choosing, am I boring or am I interesting? Right now you're choosing to pay attention or not pay attention. Right now you're choosing to be comfortable or not comfortable. Right now you're deciding if you're hot or you're cold. Right now you're choosing. What am I going to have for lunch? What am I going to have for dinner? What am I going to do after this? I hope this guy gets finished soon. What are you choosing? Or I hope this guy goes on a really long time because he's making a lot of sense. Or whatever it is you're choosing. But you're choosing. We're constantly choosing. We're choosing our money, we're choosing our jobs, we're choosing constantly. That's what the conscious mind is doing. The subjective mind, as he calls it, is that which allows what we have chosen to move into form. Our subjective mind is the creative aspect of us. It's like talking to a little child that doesn't have any no in its vocabulary yet, and just saying, will you do this? Yes, I'll do that. Will you do this? Yes, I'll do that. Whatever. And we tell the subjective mind, go do this, and it does it until we start to filter it in our own way and say, I'm not capable of doing that. And then it says, yes, I'll make sure that happens. I'm not good enough for that. Yes, I'll make sure you feel that way. I'm not lovable. I can arrange that. I'm too old. Yeah, I can really make that happen for you. That's our subjective mind. So that which we call our subjective mind is, in reality, our identity in the infinite mind. We have the ability to be identified in the infinite mind, that which says, let there be, and there is. We see then that our subjective mind is the medium through which experiences come to us. So that's where we do our work. That's where we start stretching our imagination. That's where we start believing 6 impossible things before breakfast. I did a quote last week from the Tao Te Ching, and I'm going to do it again. And it says that that which is called Tao is indistinct and ineffable. Ineffable and indistinct, yet therein are forms. Indistinct and ineffable, yet therein are objects. Indistinct and ineffable, deep-seated and unseen, and yet therein are essences. So here's this unformed substance, and yet within the unformed substance are all the forms that we want, all the forms of life. I made the metaphor last week of it's like the David Michelangelo carved out of the block of marble, that he saw the David in the marble and chipped away everything that was not like that. That's what we get to do with our imagination. Our imagination walks into the home that looks, not quite right and sees the beautiful home we can make. Okay? A lot of times it looks at the partner that may not be quite right and sees the beautiful partner we could make. Or sometimes that doesn't work too well. We're trying to correct everybody. It sees what's not there. It looks at the life, it looks at the checkbook that says I don't have enough money and sees I live in a consciousness of wealth. I live in a universe of abundance. I'm going to allow that to manifest. I was talking with somebody recently, I said, and one of the things that I do, there are times that I've been stuck in my life. Probably you have too. And one of the things that I do is I just remind myself there's only one life. And sometimes I've walked around, I've paced my floor at 2 o'clock in the morning. This is why ministers don't oftentimes have relationships, is because they do stuff like this. But at 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm up pacing my floor. There's only one life. There's only one life. And maybe that's an image that I should let go of, by the way. I can't have a relationship and do this. There's only one life. There's only one life. There's only one life. There's only one life. And remind myself of what the truth is. What do you do to remind yourself of what the truth is when you get in trouble? Find yourself a mantra. Find yourself an anchor. Find yourself something that says, I am more than this. I have the ability to go way, way beyond this. Yes, this may be the truth in my moment. This may be what I have created, and here it is right now in front of me. It's real, but I don't have to give it any power. I don't have to do battle with it. I have to choose what it is that I want and where I want to go. And that's where we get imagination. Ernest Holmes' version of that Tao Te Ching quote, we are surrounded by an intelligent force and substance from which all things come, the ultimate essence in the invisible and subjective world of all visible and objective forms and conditions. The infinite doesn't care. It doesn't have an agenda. It will show up however you want. It's like being tapped into the internet. Have you noticed the internet has a lot of stuff on it? If you want to learn how to cook something, you can learn how to cook just darn near anything. If you want to buy something, the other day I was on the internet and I found out there's this gourmet soy sauce you can buy that's specially brewed. And they say if you taste it, you'll never go back to the regular stuff. It's about $30 for a small bottle, of course. But you can find anything you want. You can find all the cute puppy pictures and videos you'd ever want on the internet. For some of us, more than we want. You can find anything on there. But a lot of times, we live our lives with this connection to the internet and looking at the same 2 or 3 pages over and over and over and over and over again. We fix the same dinner because we don't bother to figure out what else there is out there in our lives. Does that make sense? Okay. So the invitation is to expand our consciousness, to start playing with impossible ideas. John Muir, the great naturalist, said that imagination is the power to make us infinite. Imagination is the power to make us infinite. And I would slightly disagree with him, because I would say that we already are infinite. Imagination is the power to tap into the infinite nature of who we already are. How do you use your imagination? Do you use it to recycle the same stuff, or do you use it to tap into something wonderful? We all have impossible dreams. I remember when Reverend Mary and Paul were going on their cruise down the rivers of Europe. There was a part of me that I heard go, that's impossible, I'll never be able to do that. I don't do cruises, I'll never be able to afford a cruise. I just heard that chatter going off in the back of my mind. You know? Some of us, watched Reverend Sue go off to Peru and say, well, I'd love to take some sacred sites, travel like that, but, and then we'd say, why it's impossible, or not, we can't do it. Is it really impossible? No. And so I have to change my images. I have to change my images. So I'm going to invite you this week to start changing your images. I'm going to invite you this week to tap into your infinite imagination. And once we tap into the infinite imagination, we have to choose. See, one of the things that we've all met people who have blinders on who never once look at their imagination, right? I mean, it might as well just be laying dead and dormant on the side. They're living like this. You've met people like that? I know there's nobody in here like that, but you've met people like that? Okay. And then we met people who all they are is imagination. Wow! But nothing really ever happens in their lives, does it? Because they don't tap it down, they don't bring it down into form, they don't believe it, they don't do it long enough to get it tapped into form. So when we tap into our imagination, when we do that, we have to make a choice. We have to choose from all this infinite possibility, what do I want? And for some people, that's tough. There's that old Loving Spoonful song, we have to say yes to one and leave the other behind. Some of you may be old enough to remember that one. The truth of the matter is, you and I are immortal. Take a breath. The essence of who you are, the essence of who I am, is immortal. We're going to play in all this stuff for as long as we want. There's nowhere else to go. If you don't like yourself, I'm sorry, you're stuck with yourself for eternity. You better start liking yourself, So we get to play in all this stuff. But we get to choose now, what is it that I want to play in? What's the next thing I would like to play with my life in? And so we choose. Not choosing is because, it's a wonderful avoidance technique. I don't know what I really want in my life. Great. Yeah, you do, but you just don't want to tap into it and say, this is what I want. And if you have that idea that I don't know what I want in my life, then your first thing to imagine is knowing what you want in your life. Right? Okay? Start where you are. If you can't imagine yourself using your imagination, then start imagining yourself using your imagination. Or at least be willing to imagine yourself using your imagination. If you're a person who's never made decisions before, imagine yourself as a person who makes decisions. And so we avoid making the decisions because, just plain out of avoidance, we avoid it because we have a belief in lack. We think there's not enough time. We think we don't have enough money. We think we don't know how. That's one of my favorite ones that stops most of us. I don't know how to make that happen, so therefore I'm not even going to think about it. I'm not going to imagine it. Okay? We don't have to know how. That's not our job. One of my favorite phrases is, ours is to decide what, God's is to supply the how. The infinite power that's given us the idea that we want, knows how to make that idea happen through us. All we have to do is say yes and be willing to. We have all sorts of stuff that says we're not good enough. That wonderful, who am I to be fabulous? That Marianne Williamson quote, who are you not to be fabulous? You're playing small, it doesn't support the world, doesn't serve the world. When are you going to play large? And big and full. The world wants that. You want that. Yes?
Yes.
Stretch your hands out. Just stretch your body. Move your body. Come on, move your body. Some of you, this is really hard. Move your body. Just feel like what it's like to be bigger. Take a breath. Be bigger. You've just stretched your imagination, because your imagination is not just in your mind, it's in your body. So this week, 3 exercises, 3 things. 1, expand your imagination. Consider something that you have not thought possible before. It doesn't have to be the biggest, hugest thing. If you've never made more than $10,000 a month before, don't imagine yourself making $1 million a month. Maybe you want to stretch it out to $20,000 a month or $15,000 a month. If you've never had a healthy relationship before, maybe you just want to have a nice, healthy date. For some of us, that would be almost impossible, right? You don't necessarily have to run over to France and catch up with the Tour de France people and go ride the Tour de France, but maybe you want to see yourself as just a little more healthy. But think of something that's impossible and start to allow that to happen. And then, second, spend half an hour a day believing it. Remember, we talked about the original definition of imagination. It's forming mental images, sensations, and concepts. Feel what it would be like to occupy that body you want. Feel, have the sensations of whatever it is you want, to be in that relationship, to be on that date, to whatever it is you want. Start to immerse yourself in the visual, in the sensations, the smell. Get your senses involved as if you're already there. Spend half an hour a day doing that. Will you do that? And finally, remember what it was like to be a child. Remember what you were like when you were a child, because most of us had a pretty good imagination. I was counseling with somebody this past week and who was having a difficulty trying to figure out what they wanted to do with their life, what they wanted to be when they grew up. And I said, well, what did you want to be when you were a child? Oh, nothing. Back in my mind, I'm going, no, that's not possible. We all have something we want to be when we're a child. We all come into this life having an idea and a purpose. But most of us forget that. We suppress it. We get all that knowledge stuff piled on top of us, and we say, oh, that was just silly to think of that. Let me be an accountant instead. Sorry for the accountants in the room. If that was your life dream, then please. But as a friend of mine once said, you don't hear a whole lot of artists quitting their jobs to go because their life dream is always to be an actuarial. But you do hear of actuarials quitting their job to go be an artist. What is it that in your heart of hearts you wanted to be when you were a child? Start remembering that. Start allowing that to move forward. And play as that. So that's your 3 things. Expand your imagination. Use your imagination. A good question to ask with that is, what wants to be birthed through me? What wants to come through me now? What wants to show up in my life now? Play with 6 impossible things before breakfast. Begin to believe them. Believe them. And play with your imagination from your childhood. We good with that? Yes. That's your assignment. I'm going to close with a reading from one of my favorite authors, Raymond Charles Barker, from his book, The Power of Decision. This is a great book, by the way. There's actually a whole class on it. We're going to do that class someday, and if we haven't already. Raymond Charles Barker was one of the early religious science ministers. And he has a way of sometimes speaking truth in your face. In other words, he doesn't pull punches. So this is one of those. Just gird your loins. In my years of counseling, I have found that only those who really want what they want enough to decide that they shall have it will get what they want. The others mutter at me that great statement, with God all things are possible. They expect me to agree, which I do. But their concept of this statement is that it will be done unto them without any effort on their part. They expect their half-thinking to be rewarded by a whole result. Isn't that a great line? Yes. They expect their half-thinking to be rewarded by a whole result. This is a spiritual and mental impossibility. Those who have actually decided to have what they want do not expect special favors from the universe. They are ready and willing to think what they want long enough to get what they want. They are not afraid of the good, solid mental work of believing. They know there are no miracles. Thomas Edison knew what he wanted. He wanted to create a light bulb that was not dependent on oil and fire. And he kept at it long enough until he knew that it was going to happen. John F. Kennedy wanted to place a man on the moon. That was his dream within 10 years, within the decade. That was his dream. And even though he didn't live long enough to see the dream, he inspired enough people that they kept the dream going until it happened. In both cases, they had to overcome some failures. Edison had to overcome something like 10,000 ways of finding out how the light bulb didn't work before he found out how it did. How many of us would have given up after about 20? Okay? The space program had to endure people actually losing their lives, a whole lot of expensive mistakes. You know, I remember there used to be blooper reels of some of the early rockets that would take off, they'd get up to here, then they turn sideways, or they just spin out of control, or whatever. And that was, you're talking about anywhere from tens of thousands to millions of dollars. They had to endure all that. But they kept on going. They kept on thinking what they wanted to think long enough to make it happen. Kennedy asked Wernher von Braun, the top rocket scientist of his day, what it would take to put a person on the moon and bring him back safely. And all Wernher von Braun said was, the will to do so. The will to do so. Do you have the will to create the life you want? And are you willing to do the full thinking and create the full result? Let's take that into prayer. And so I know that there is only one life. Beautiful, perfect, whole, complete, beyond our imagination, beyond the limits and the boundaries of our imagination. That field of infinite possibility is and is the only thing there is. It is pure love, it is pure joy, it is pure good, it is opulent abundance. It is vibrant life energy. It is wisdom, it is creativity. It is all of that and more. And that infinite presence is all that there is. Because it is infinite, there is nothing else outside of it. No matter how many ways it individuates, there is still nothing outside of it. And so we are and have to be one of that infinite presence. We always have been, we always will be. There has never been any place for us to be other than within and one of that presence. We are not a part of it. We are all of it individualized as each of us. The whole of it is available to us. It is individualized as us. As Emerson says, we are inlets and may become outlets of the divine. And so I speak my word that this week as we go into our lives, we take this imagination, this beautiful gift, this mental faculty that we have, and stretch it beyond where it's ever been before. We open it up. We say yes to things we never even thought we could say yes to before. We say yes to a good, to a life of good that is greater than we have ever imagined before. We start to open it up. We are God's Ferraris. And most of us have been idling along in first gear. And so we hit the gas. We take ourselves out and find out how fast can we go? How good of a life can we create? How much can we open up? We recognize that as we do this, we give permission to everybody else on the planet to do so. Our good, our joy, our love, our health, our vibrant aliveness blesses everyone else. We don't take from anyone. We don't have to hold ourselves back. And for this I'm grateful. For each person who says yes to this, for each person who gets out on the road and says, let's see what this thing will do. Let's see what this thing called life, my individualized expression of life will do. For each person, I am grateful. For the Spirit that infuses us all. that says whatever you think you can do even more. For that I am grateful. And for all the good that is created in our lives this week and beyond, I am ever so grateful. For all the ways that it touches and ripples out into our greater community, our greater world, I am ever so grateful. And so we allow this to unfold in form. We release it. We don't have to figure out the how. We let go of the how. We give that into the law, into spirit, into that which is tasked with creating the how. We simply provide the what. And so we let that how go. We let it move into form. We let our what be formed into experience, be formed into substance in this world, in our lives, in real, tangible, visible form. We let it be. And together we say, so it is.